All right. Welcome. What's going on? My name is Jethro. Welcome to the Modern Thought Room, where our main objective is to do the thinking that the day requires. We're going to jump straight into it. Um, Made an episode about groupthink, and I focus mostly on groupthink in a professional context, right? So, not in a social context. Go back and check that video out. Definitely a good point of conversation. I don't necessarily solve or fix anything in that conversation, but it's sort of like the appetizer to this discussion, right? So this episode is going to be about a sort of countering groupthink in a professional setting. So if and this is big language, but if you have found yourself on the less than positive side of groupthink in a professional context, you want to stick to what's coming up next, just because I'm going to kind of go through some things that you can kind of use to safeguard yourself. And then also, if you are in a position of leadership, that you can correct so that this doesn't continue and ultimately stifle um, what could come out of your team and individuals later down the line. All right. So countering groupthink, essentially groupthink holds the group back over time. Now, one of the things that is tough for people to track is that because the consequences of groupthink, and we're talking about, yes, there are positive moments for group thinking. We're talking about the negative context within a professional setting. All right. So one of the things is that how group thinking, all right, or groupthink in a professional context, how it harms the group in the long term is something that can be overlooked simply because it's a long term thing, right? So, for example, you have a project, you have a client need, you have something that you guys are looking to develop, fix, or improve in house, and it actually would behoove the group to get to a mutually agreed upon thing immediately so that you guys can act upon it. And that's not, no one's like faulting, blaming, or even saying that that's wrong. Now, the issue though is when that develops into a culture where we all need to quickly agree on the same thing so that we can move forward, or that we feel like we can move forward with confidence, right? Now, again, time is limited. People are doing a bunch of things, but doing things well will always require sacrifice. It will, in some, like, if you want to do something well, you will end up in some way having to sacrifice in some form, shape, or fashion. All right. So, in a way, right, we're thinking about undoing groupthink and replacing it with a more participatory culture, right, that makes it so that people feel empowered to contribute, right? And that those couple words are very important: participatory and empowered, so that we can get the best outcomes. All right. So first, leaders need to think of their approaches different, or leaders need to approach um, group kind of engagements a bit different, right? However, they're walking into that situation, right? They need to kind of step back, and this applies to everyone, but I'm just framing it in a way to kind of talk to leaders immediately, right? So you're going into a meeting, you're going to a call, you guys are deliberating or something, even it's a brief debrief, whatever you want to call it, right? What are you doing in preparation for that call? What are the points that you're outlining? What's the background that you already know about those participating? What are some of the pain points? What are some of the hangups? What are some of the things you recognize would not be able, right, to draw the best out of the audience? What are some things you realize would be able to draw the best out of the audience, right? And those are some kind of like rough, just, spitballing type of questions to ask yourself as you're approaching something when you're in that position that will kind of dictate the flow and how things go, right? If that's your responsibility, you need to not just go in with like sort of like a subconscious, I'm listening for, or I want to hear this, I want to hear that. If I don't hear one of these two things, people aren't helping me. Now, I get it. Yo, people in leadership have such a tremendous weight on their shoulders that they don't really have time to always be negotiating with people and running through scenarios and things like that. But at the same time, they do have an obligation to make sure that people feel that they're in a position to contribute meaningfully. When people feel like they can't contribute meaningfully, what happens? They stop contributing and they lean into just agreement. And what that does is that then opens up the room for getting blindsided or not being able to find new opportunities that ultimately help you guys in some way, shape, or form, fashion. Right. So first thing, leaders, just when you're going into your conversations, just take a step back, evaluate, how am I going into this call? How am I going into this conversation? And what tweak, right? And a core premise of essentially what this channel is about is that fundamentally, one of the quickest ways to get an impact or get a change of results is to think differently. That's like one of the most immediate ways. It's not, let me go and take 5 weeks to go finish this course. Let me go take 3 months to go get this new certificate. In the now and immediate, what you need for next week, what you need for 2 weeks from now, what you need for today, it's to change how you're thinking about something so that you can see where the opportunity lie or where the pitfalls are so that you do not fall into them, right? So thinking, I think this is not like a brand new thing I'm saying. It's just that, again, with all the weight, with all the pressure, with all the speed, it's easy to overlook or forget the fact that, hey, if I just step back, switch up how I'm thinking about something, that will, open my horizons or open my vision to seeing how I can find alternative solutions that can be mutually beneficial. Okay. So, second thing, leaders need to ask the team to think differently about their contribution, right? So, when we're thinking about what types of guidance we're providing, leaders are providing, we need to make sure that the instruction enables folks to actually dream big. Now, that's big language also, but the dream big, right? Folks that are working in cooperating with, they need to dream big, right? If they can't dream big, or you're scared that them dreaming big is going to somehow, conflict with an agenda you have or agenda that's, and again, with a lot of this stuff, team leads, managers, coaches, lead, all those like titles and roles. Yes, you do need a singular vision in order to consistently get results. That is true. But the next level of it and what today, this modern period that we're living in, what it requires is to always have an eye for what could be next in a way that I think the past just didn't. And because of that, you need to make sure that, okay, wait, I'm not just disregarding things that are meaningful and that can help us in our objectives moving forward, right? A contribution does not need to bring the result today. It can bring the results in the future. And as long as you have a systematic way about storing those things to the side and then picking up what's useful for the now and today, you will be fine, right? I'm pretty sure folks will be fine. Okay. And then lastly, I'd say is to summarize, review, highlight, justify, right? And let me slow down, right? So first, leaders yourselves, just think differently going into, conversations, meetings, debates, blah, blah, blah. Second, leaders, ask your team to think differently, specifically about their contributions and what it means for them to contribute. And then third, make sure to summarize, review, highlight, and justify. Now, this third part is very important. I think sort of like a one corporate lingo is like closing the loop, right? Folks like to say closing the loop, blah, 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 right? And what does that do? It gives people comfort and reassurance that something has been acted on and has been secured. That's really the main thing it does. Right. Now, why it's important to summarize, review, highlight, and justify is because that then is what allows your team, the collective, to track what is valued, right? What contributions they're making, which one, what's valued, and then what are the outcomes when valued contributions are given a fair shot. These two things alone, and there are many other things that can be part of this fall in this, like summarizing, reviewing, highlighting, and justifying type of space, is people need to see, okay, yes, I submitted this idea, it flopped, we came back, we realized why it flopped, and now we can move forward. Or I submitted this idea, we decided to go with it, now it works, and now we can also see why it works. Intel is like, you never run out of the benefit of having good intel, right? Never. So the summarizing, reviewing, highlighting, justifying, that part's really important. I think, before I move on, let me jump back to this justifying part. One of the things is, if you ever feel like you're in a position where you don't need to justify anything, you're around the corner from losing the plot. Around the corner from losing the plot. You justify things to folks because it shows that you respect them and you respect what they have invested in, what's at stake for them. Parents don't need to justify things to their kids because they're kids. Some parents decide to justify certain things to their kids because they don't want their kids to feel slighted, right? You, as a working professional, right? If you have this like mindset that I don't need to justify anything, or maybe it could be you're overlooking this as a step. You don't realize, hey, I might need to do some type of justification. If that's the culture that you build, and you can build it by accident. Like, we're gonna all be honest, we're not on 100 every day. You can mess around and build it by accident. You build it by accident, is still that culture of people don't necessarily know why, right? And folks are okay if you told them, hey, nah, we didn't go with this because XYZ. And that could be written in 2 sentences, right? But justification and having a culture of justification, it gets people attuned to the fact that, hey, I need to be thorough in what I'm bringing forward, right? And that I need to then also do some additional legwork to get everything in the right context. In context, I gotta do a whole episode on context. Context is like body slamming a lot of people. Context is body slamming a lot of people. And let me not go into it because I'm actually kind of getting excited about talking about context. But context, again, body slams a lot of people. All right, so we're gonna move past body slams. So the group think short term good, long term, in a broad way, good because of culture, right? So group think short term. Group think short term, um, you know, get, as I said earlier, it helps you get things done, move forward, quote unquote, efficiently. All right. Long term, right? In a general way, because you do need a singular vision, it is helpful for culture, identity, those types of things. All right. Now, it becomes bad over time because it limits the scope that the team can see, envision, and move against confidently, right? So if folks don't feel like they can really make a difference, they'll start just using less energy, because really to contribute and to contribute something meaningfully, it takes energy. Like, it takes energy, and everybody, as professionals, you either have the requisite skill, education, or experience wherever you are, So, in order to do something well, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, right? And the different levels that you can operate at. And it's up to you how you want to show up every day. If you want to show up on 100, you're going to show up on 100. If you feel like you're not valued at 100, you're valued at 75, you show up at 75. If you feel like you're actually valued at 50, you'll show up at 50. And that's something that, can become a problem, because then you're like, hey, let's take sports. This coach is wondering why the players that are coming off the bench aren't giving 110% when they get in the game. Well, that's because you're giving them garbage minutes, right? That's because you're throwing them in there when things don't matter. That's because you're not pulling them inside and instilling confidence in them, right? And those are things like the sports context for coaching is a way different. But let me not get off too off track. But in the sports context is different because sports coaches, whether they want to acknowledge it or acknowledge it or not, they understand that psychologically and emotionally they are responsible for those that are in their team, in the collective. Professionals in a non-athletic context, it's not at the forefront of how they're thinking about engaging with the people that make up their team or are their subordinates. It's not, let me think about psychological and emotional aspects as I'm trying to build the talent that I have. And that's a whole nother piece, but I'm gonna touch that. Second thing, jumping back, replacing groupthink with a more participatory culture and environment. Very important. Play it safe. Find easy opportunities to do this. Don't risk, client business. Find ways to work it in there, right? And people are creative. You'll find a way. Leaders need to evaluate how they steward intellectual property of their subordinates, teammates, and direct reports. Steward intellectual property of these folks, right? I remember when I was in grad school, something that threw me off was they made me sign like this waiver that anything intellectually that I produce is the property of the university. And I was just like, man, do I really have to sign this? Like, I'm not trying to sign this, because what if I get like a really good idea, build something, and then now the school ran away with it? And I think for a lot of people, especially academics, that's always a threat, that you might be working, you might have an advisor, professor, and you guys have research that kind of runs parallel or similar in some type of way, and they're kind of stealing and taking bits off of you, and in some, not, I don't think, I might have, I might be off. You guys got to correct me, but in some cases that does lead to whole scale theft, whole scale theft of intellectual property, and you don't want that. That's never a good look. But yeah, in professional settings, it's very important to understand that, hey, I am, as somebody that's in charge of this group, this team, this cohort, I am responsible for how I manage their intellectual property and contributions, because it takes, again, a lot of confidence, energy, and time to really produce anything of value intellectually, right? It just does. Okay. Leaders need to ask and give license to team to think differently about what their contributions can be, right? So you want to think about making sure that you give folks the license so that they can innovate, safeguard, consider, and build culture, right? The innovate part is pretty important. We know the difference between innovation and invention, right? Invention being something sort of brand new that hasn't been in existence. Innovation is just improving on something that's already existent. And innovation is arguably the bread and butter of most successful teams, businesses, organizations, etc. Right? To innovate, folks need to be able to identify opportunity. You only are able to identify opportunity if you're sharp, right? If you get the full context, and you have the confidence to act on whatever initial insight that you're running on. So if you get an initial insight and you feel, maybe you might not have the support, you might not have the grounds to run with it, that might kind of, you might just like, taper off, leave it in a notebook that you never go back to. Right. But a person that's confident and that has that initial insight of how they can innovate in a certain area, now they can start investing in that. And investing in that could mean a lot of things. Right. Um, and what's this word? I got some notes here, and my handwriting is. Let me show proof of concept. Let me see. Does that you guys see like how bad my handwriting is? Yeah. So I'm trying to go off of this, and yeah. So I'm gonna skip that one because I just got crossed up by it. But cult is that culture? Yeah, that is culture. All right, culture. So, um, right, when leaders do this, they build a culture. They build a culture that, hey, we're not going to um, submit to group thinking, but we're going to have a culture where people can contribute in a way that produces a type of integrity, intellectual curiosity, and also I'll say this too, because sometimes this stuff can get like lost in between the lines. Um, when you're in a group and you have an objective, the objective is still the objective, right? So allowing people to contribute does not necessarily mean you won't meet your objective. So if we need to discourage, not intentionally, if we need to, discourage or not encourage, let me say that. If we need to not encourage sort of divergent thinking, right? So that we can meet our objectives, right? And we find ourselves in a position where it seems like no one here has any additional skills, right? We need to slow down because we need to realize that people have the skills, people have the education, and people have the experience to meet objectives in a variety of ways and with a certain type of creativity that I think is cheap right now. I think some stuff is cheap. I think some stuff is cheap because what I see, people I work with, people I encounter, folks have it already. Just their, if you're not in the optimal situation, it won't get nurtured. And that's one of the unfortunate things is, again, especially in sports coaches, you can pull up a sports coach right now, get his take on this or her take on this, and they will literally let you know that they understand, the better ones will, that they need to nurture the like sort of psychological, emotional aspect of their team in order to get the best physical output or results. Now, you can train skills all you want, but some of these other aspects that come from coming alongside of them, right? So if you take it back to the professional setting where it's like, you know, you coming alongside of them, giving them some type of justification. You're not justifying everything every day, but you give somebody a little bit of justification that then allows them to clock back in next time, locked in, knowing, hey, I didn't make the right contribution this time, but next time, boss, I'm gonna get you with an even more accurate and to the point solution for what we need, and we're gonna run with it, right? Hey, coach, I know we don't usually draw a plays for me, but I realized from watching game and watching film that if you run this play for me right here, I'll be able to expose this and take advantage of this opportunity right here. And I have a soccer background, and I can help us get a clean sheet. I was a defender, help us get a clean sheet. Strikers will be like, I can help us get goals. So that's a different thing. But yeah, so very important. And lastly, 5 moments to show proof of concept, which goes a little bit of what I was saying. 5 moments to show proof of concept is right. It's really easy to point out when stuff doesn't work well, and it's also really easy to brush over things that were really decisive and made a difference. And maybe, they only get celebrated when they become the pan ultimate thing, but maybe we don't celebrate by identifying and paying respect to the daily things, the daily decisions and contributions that help our teams run effectively and efficiently. So, backing up and just closing, summarizing this kind of countering groupthink combo. Groupthink holds folks back professionally, and leaders have to acknowledge it, right? It's not the greatest thing to say, hey, maybe I'm stifling folks that work with me. But it happens, and for the most part, most people that work with you understand why it happens. What they're looking for, is for you to pass the baton, the olive branch, and say, hey, what slight adjustments can we make so that everybody's not only on side, but they're starting to do their best thinking, and their best thinking will ultimately help us get even better results, because we are still in the business of getting results, right? We're still in and I probably should hit cut right here, because this is one of my personal pet peeves. I feel like there's this just notion that if it isn't done this way immediately, all is lost. And taking some time for folks to weigh in and go back and forth will lose us so much time that we won't be able to deliver what we want to deliver or make the impact that we want to make. And for me, as somebody that likes to kind of intellectually spar, I'm like, yo, two people that's thinking seriously and you give them 15 minutes to hash something out, I would side with them. I wouldn't say they're not gonna come up with something good, right? Because within that, you kind of start building in different frameworks for how you discuss things, right? When you're leading your calls, when you're coming together, when you're assigning people different roles, and you're using that so that that collective brain power can, one, solve the immediate objective. And then what I think is arguably for today, for the modern day, very, very important, is after you've solved the primary objective, you have additional lanes that you can attack that still move you and your team, your objective, your bigger objective forward. Why? Because you don't want to start a loop where you have to all of a sudden re-ramp up to figure out where we can make an impact, where we can be innovative, where we can do all of this. Because anytime you do research, anytime you do collect data, anytime you work with clients and you're working on one specific thing from them, but you learn other things, throwing out those other things in this modern world, I think is reckless, right? So hope this episode was helpful. If it is, drop a comment, let me know if it stirred up some thought. If there's any sort of specific nuance take you have, drop it. Love to discuss it. Thank you again. Appreciate you. Peace. Ciao. Adios.